When the cell door slams shut on a criminal, you might think they've got their just desserts, but the law doesn't stop there.
Criminals are now having their most prized possessions hunted down, seized and sold at auction to the highest bidder. Welcome to Ill-Gotten Gains.
On today's Ill-Gotten Gains, we follow police in Wales and the Midlands as they hunt for cash from a drug deal. And a gang smuggling a lethal cargo onto the streets of London discover what it's like to be taken down by armed police and watch as their prized asset is taken and sold at auction. And money seized from criminals is making life for innocent people much better. Cash taken from crooks in Manchester is helping to keep these kids very busy indeed.
I enjoy spending that money, knowing where it's come from.
Across Britain every day, teams of specialist police officers are using a powerful law called the Proceeds of Crime Act to take cash and property from people who made money in illegal ways. They might be fraudsters, drug dealers or benefit cheats, but any cash they made through breaking the law will be taken away by police. They've seized over £150 million from crooks in a year. And it's not just cash that gets seized. This building may not look like Sotheby's, but millions of pounds worth of goods owned by crooks get sold off here every year. This is a location miles away from London, where they hold barely advertised auctions called Proceeds of Crime sales. They're open to the public, and any ill-gotten gains are seized by the police and sold to the highest bidder.
Mick Beattie is one of the leading proceeds of crime specialists in the UK. It's his job to work out how much money criminals make and then seize those ill-gotten gains. Money laundering is one way crooks can clean dirty cash.
Money laundering has three layers: placement, layering and integration. So you place it somewhere and you disguise it and then you integrate it. So I could be a drug dealer and I've got tens of thousands of pounds a week coming in. If I'm caught with that, I have no explanation. So if I create a cash-rich business, something like a car wash or a sunbed salon or something along those lines, I could say, last week I had a bumper week and 1,000 people, £100 a time, used my car wash. I could then declare that as an income, pay tax on it and get money back.
Some criminals work very hard to hide their money from the prying eyes of the law. But police have a special weapon in the fight to get criminal cash back. Meet the specialist team of financial investigators who follow the money and never give up.
In the early hours of the morning in Wales, a large team of officers are preparing to carry out a series of dawn raids. We can't show any of their faces because they all operate undercover. They're here because financial investigators from South Wales's Tarion police team think they may have discovered a money laundering operation. They suspect a convicted drug dealer may have hidden nearly £100,000 by giving it to accomplices to invest on his behalf. So this morning, they plan to make multiple arrests.
When we get there today, there's a number of addresses, say in the Newport area. Police will initially attempt to make contact with the occupiers by knocking the door. Hopefully they'll get their attention and they'll open the door and those persons will be arrested and the house will be searched.
Elite police financial investigators will be looking for any traces of money by going through any financial records they find.
They'll be looking for all sorts of documentation, potentially sort of media, laptops.
The suspected drug dealer's accomplices are not aware that they are being investigated, so they're in for a surprise this morning.
5 addresses have been attended today. It's fairly standard because usually money laundering involves a number of people. It's about a minute or so away now.
Now a team of officers is in place at their suspect's address. They will want to make a fast entry to ensure they can seize any evidence that may tie the alleged drug money to the men. With a large team of police at his door, the suspect decides to open up. The financial investigation is on.
Warrant to search his premises.
The person's inside, they've been spoken to by the police and officers from the National Crime Agency, and that person is now under arrest. And then the remaining officers stay here and search his premises looking for items and evidence related to the investigation.
As the suspect is led away, the search can now begin.
The team now are going to be searching the premises for documentation and other evidence in relation to the investigation. We will be looking for documentation regarding money laundering, any large amounts of cash, and also other items in relation to the offence.
The arrested man has already had all of his bank accounts frozen. He can't access any cash he has without police approval.
Restraining orders have been put on his accounts, so they're currently being restrained now by the CPS.
Nearly 100 miles away in the Midlands, and another team of financial investigators are about to visit 2 more suspects in the money laundering case. Like the suspect in Wales, the 2 Birmingham people thereafter aren't expecting a visit from the police.
We're assisting officers from Tarion, the Welsh Regional Asset Recovery Team, in a money laundering investigation. 2 adult suspects to be arrested who are suspected of being involved in a money laundering offence off the back of a drugs trafficking conviction down in Wales. We're looking for evidence in the form of receipts, documents, property sales, bank statements, any communications or any documents that will show their involvement.
This is the house where the 2 suspects live. Police are hoping there might be some evidence inside to prove their suspicions. And one man inside has had to be taken away for questioning. Now the financial investigators can move in and look for anything that will link these suspects to money laundering for the drug dealer in Wales.
They're in there now, searching for the items we're looking for.
Inside, they have found a series of documents and other items they suspect will hold vital clues to how the drug dealer's money was getting spent.
So the search has gone to plan. Lots of items of interest have been discovered and obtained. 2 large boxes of material documents which will need to be sifted through, and numerous documents, bank statements, lots of communications that may or may not, but hopefully may relate to the offence that the Welsh lads or the Welsh team are investigating. We've conducted the search. There are 2 people in custody. Both are en route to a local police station. They will be interviewed by the Welsh RAT throughout the course of the day.
And back in Wales, the financial investigators are moving from the suspect's house to his car.
We've identified the fact that the suspect was being arrested from the address as a vehicle. As a result, we've obtained authority to search the vehicle also. And same as the premises, we're now looking for evidence of money laundering.
Financial investigators understand the devious hidden world that criminals and their cash inhabit.
You could find almost anything, but it's usually documentation which will have in them bank accounts, hidden bank accounts that they've been using to launder the money through. Usually find cash cards that they use in order to top up fees and funds on, that they also use to hide the money. It could be a variety of things, paying in receipts. Also SIM cards that they use for their mobile phones, because they use several SIM cards in order to communicate with each other. They'll try and live below the radar, try and secure their money away in bank accounts.
But on days like today, financial investigators throw a criminal's world into the spotlight and look for evidence of spending the proceeds of crime, and they think they have something.
Totally different address again then, Waze's case, supposedly living there.
Yeah.
What's the connection with that address?
Yeah.
And hidden away in the car, investigators think they've found some important information that might help with the money laundering investigation. Later on, we'll see exactly what the team have found.
Arrested criminals will often have bundles of cash taken off them when police suspect it's been made illegally. But it's not just money the police can take. as this group of heavyweight villains found out.
It all began after police in Kent tipped off the National Crime Agency about a frightening gang in their area. Police believed the gang were planning major criminal acts and needed to be stopped. The NCA officer we spoke to is covert, so has hidden his face to tell us the chilling details of the case as it's unfolded.
The Kent police came to us as the National Crime Agency. They had a basic intelligence picture around a criminal family who were known as the Shillings. They were involved in trafficking and importation of commodities, and that could include drugs, in this day and age, organised immigration crime. So they were the threats and the concerns that Kent police and ourselves had.
27-year-old Harry Shilling was identified as the kingpin of this organised crime group, known for importing and selling drugs with links to street gangs in London.
Harry Shilling did have a degree of sophistication and discipline. So he had a criminal group where he was able to stand off and direct and would utilise a trusted lieutenant to assist as a go-between.
His lieutenant was 30-year-old Michael Dufresne, with lackeys Richard Rye, David Payne and Christopher Owen making up the rest of the numbers.
So they'll have someone who's dedicated in relation to transport or logistics, someone who may handle the money for them, someone who actually will go hands on any of the commodity, and remain very disciplined in relation to their communication with each other as well.
Officers deployed a surveillance team to watch the gang as they operated, but little did the NCA realise the men they were watching were planning a deadly crime.
So in this case, the surveillance team are deployed on Harry Shilling, and unbeknown to him, the team are there covering his every move and just recording his associations and what he's up to when we think there's relevant days.
With a team of officers watching, nothing went unnoticed. Evidence suggested the gang were planning something big. Surveillance was ramped up when officers discovered they appeared to be hatching a plan to buy a seaworthy boat, the Albernina.
There are operatives that were in public houses that they'd frequent. Some of the operatives were able to watch them when they were using their smartphones, when they were actually looking at marine sites, and they're actually looking at the Albernina for sale. It was quite apparent then that they were now all engaged in a criminal venture. So we focused much of our activities then on movement of that boat.
The boat was staked out 24/7 to find out exactly what was going on.
What we started to see unfold, it was obvious that something was going to be trafficked. And from the assessments we made of that intelligence, it was very likely to include the trafficking of firearms.
Intelligence the NCA had on the source and route of the weapons had led them to believe these were no ordinary guns, but instead mass casualty hardware, which in the wrong hands could have devastating consequences. This is a Czechoslovakian VZ61 Scorpion.
This was initially designed as a gun to protect someone from armed attack, but obviously by very definition it can be used in an armed attack as well.
Out of all the machine guns on the market, the Scorpion is the easiest to use, and for a gang looking to assert its presence, an ideal weapon.
This is extremely controllable. This is designed to put the rounds practically in the same hole. So it's extremely devastating. Whereas you might be hit with 1 9 or 2 9mm bullets, if you're hit with 5 or 6 of these, your chances of living are very slim.
On the 9th of August, activities around the boat picked up, and it was clear something big was about to take place.
We could see that David Payne was preparing for a trip, and so we developed our surveillance strategies around what control could we have of that boat, if any, and what preparation could we make for its return. We looked out to the border force to give us some assistance, really, of putting plans in place for tracking that boat as it departed the UK, and then give us an early alert as of when it was returning.
With Shilling, Dufresne and Rye staying on dry land to monitor proceedings, Payne and Owen steered the boat out of the harbour on the 9th of August 2015, none the wiser of the welcoming party they would be returning to.
By the 10th of August, we're aware that it's now returning. So with our own surveillance teams, we look to shadow its movements. And it initially arrives back at Rochester. So with the surveillance team, we can then keep control of David Payne and see what's going to happen with the commodity that we now believe is on that yacht.
Officers on the ground watched as a van pulled up beside the boat, and David Payne and Christopher Owen began to move suitcases inside.
Our officers on the ground are reporting the movements and the activity around that boat, which then continues to build our suspicion that they are now ready to move a commodity that's on board. With those individuals using blue rubber gloves, their activity on the boat was quite excited.
Waiting for the van to leave the scene, armed officers could now make their move. Not knowing if there were more weapons inside, they quietly crept up to take down those inside.
They've got to be able to react to anything that now comes out. On this occasion, we can see the guys are coming out, showing their hands, and they are complying. You imagine what's going through the firearms officer's mind when they first approach that yacht, knowing that it's trafficked firearms to the UK.
With half of the gang arrested, a team further down the road were in hot pursuit of a van full of firearms, now being driven by David Payne and about to enter a main road in the United Kingdom.
He had to be dealt with very quickly and very safely before he reached the main road. David Payne was arrested in the driving seat of the van just before it entered the main road, and in the back were the cases. And in relation to Mr. Payne, as soon as he was arrested and saw the police there, he explained straight away there was guns in the back of the vehicle.
After catching Payne red-handed, the officers recovered the firearms and discovered the sheer quantity of what the gang had been trafficking. Inside the bags were 22 assault rifles and 9 machine pistols, worth over £100,000.
From an initial check of what's in those bags at the scene of the arrest, officers reported back to us that they were assault weapons and machine pistols. You know, the devastating firepower they would have on the UK and the criminal market, you know, is catastrophic.
With the firearms seized and some of the gang in custody, there were still 3 men on the loose. Dufresne, Rye, and possibly the most dangerous of them all, Shilling. Intelligence tracked the men down to the nearest DIY store, where they were buying tools to bury the weapons.
So here you can see them purchasing what we're saying is a burial kit for the weapons that they've just trafficked. You can see they've got shovels, they buy a pickaxe and other items ready to bury these weapons. Those bottles contain ammonia. It's our case that they would have used ammonia when they buried the weapons to put off any tracking dog scents, but also maybe they feel that they could have forensically cleaned the weapons with them as well.
Despite the gang's best efforts to hide all evidence, forces were onto them and waiting by their vehicle for their return. The force of the takedown takes Shilling by surprise.
He's actually shocked, so they're taking medical attention to him straight away.
Just let your heart rate settle down and be fine.
Once we're there in numbers, and we're there with safe tactics, and it's that shock and awe that gives us the advantage, really, over the people that we're targeting.
But one man escapes, Richard Rye. He was spotted sitting inside a nearby McDonald's with families just a few yards away, holding a suspicious-looking box. With no idea what was inside the box, officers were on high alert. This CCTV footage shows what happens next. Rye looks agitated inside the restaurant as he frantically tries to contact the other members of the gang. He doesn't realise that the man nearest to him is an armed policeman.
The officer, we've just walked through the shop there, is one of our surveillance officers. He's looking at Richard Rye. He's deciding what action to take.
As Rye goes to leave the restaurant, the armed officer has to act.
He's not prepared to let him move any further with that box or that unknown item. Takes control. And then 2 other colleagues come and assist.
Having safely secured the arrests of each of the gang, shocking messages later found on mobile phones show exactly what they had planned and just how menacing these criminals were. proving vital evidence in their eventual downfall.
So Schilling starts off the message to Dufresne saying, "They're home. We're now officially gangsters." And Dufresne replies, "It's got proper real, G." Schilling replies, "We are a firm, ain't we?" Dufresne says, "Proper heavy and armed to the teeth. No one wants beef, fam." And Schilling concludes, "We got the gear, the arms, let's get this paper and stack big. LOL." You know, that's quite a chilling message and gives a clear indication of their attitude towards what they've just trafficked over to the UK.
Despite Schilling and Dufresne brazenly pleading not guilty, the evidence was stacked up against them and the jury delivered a guilty verdict. Christopher Owen was jailed for 5 years. David Payne and Richard Wright for 14 years each. Michael Dufresne for 27 years. And Harry Schilling for 30 years behind bars.
If you look at that comment of, "We're now officially gangsters," that's something that they're saying to each other in the context of having access to controlled drugs that they're supplying and now having access of mass casualty weapons to enforce that enterprise. So it is particularly worrying. But in this case, we're able to display that to the court direct and they've been dealt with appropriately.
Now behind bars, forces punished them even more by seizing and selling everything they illegally owned, starting with the boat. And in a double blow, financial investigators will make sure any profits will go straight into the public purse, rather than into the hands of these cold-blooded criminals.
Historically, you know, criminals would look at a criminal conviction, look at a custodial sentence, and would just suck that up and get on with the sentence and come out and carry on. With the proceeds of crime now, it gives that double jeopardy. Because of the overall value of this crime, he will have that hanging over his head and will have to pay what the courts direct in relation to proceeds of crime hearings.
Later on, we'll discover how much this boat, which was used to smuggle the guns, can fetch at auction, as the NCA now begin to claw back the proceeds of crime.
Most hardened criminals would rather go to jail than have their most precious possessions taken away. And it was no different for this dodgy car dealer when he left a trail of unhappy customers in his wake. He tried to give trading standards the runaround, but instead ended up getting his own fingers burnt. Sometimes even minor complaints can scratch the surface of a major criminal operation, as Colin and Sue Rumford from Trading Standards Regional Scambuster team at York found out. As a result of one investigation, these two ended up bringing down one of the UK's biggest fraudsters. It all started with a simple complaint.
We had a referral from the Regional Trading Standards group, and it was in relation to a car dealer, and the person operating the company was Kurt Klaus.
These are just a few of the complaints that we investigated when we started to look into the matter.
Klaus was running a company selling dodgy motors on a massive scale. The vehicles he was selling were near undrivable, badly damaged, and in some cases written off.
He was operating the garage as a complete scam. There were times when people would take their vehicles in for Kurt Klaus to sell, and then they'd never see the vehicles again. They'd just vanish. And if you like them, it'd just take them.
Klaus and his cronies' business practices left a lot to be desired. Customers scammed out of their hard-earned cash were becoming increasingly distressed. And the cars he was selling to people were riddled with faults.
Some of the cars were at the cheaper end of the market, £2,000, but the ones we looked at on the internet were anything up to £50,000. Some of the people that were buying £2,000-3,000 vehicles, it was a very important purchase for them. They could ill afford to lose the money.
When they went back to complain, Kurt Klaus and his group intimidated them, so there was quite a few of the consumers just left the site because they were frightened.
One of his customers was Gary, who had the misfortune of spending £10,000 buying a car from Kurt Klaus and wound up taking his life in his own hands just to get home in one piece. He can still remember the moment he pitched up at Klaus's showroom to take a look at the car he wanted.
So I arrived at the garage and walked in, and the first thing I thought was that there's a lot of people there. So there was probably 7, 8, 9 men standing around in the offices as well. And I stood in the forecourt, no one came out. Had to then walk through the forecourt into this big shed. Walked into the office, and again, there was no customer service. So you kind of think the cars must sell themselves. In the back of my head, that's what I was thinking, the cars must sell themselves. There wasn't a guy in a suit, there wasn't anyone dressed particularly smart.
Gary already had his eye on a car he'd spotted online. He took it for a test drive and, noticing a few niggles, haggled the price down before handing over his hard-earned cash and embarking on the long trip home. But a few hours in, something wasn't right.
Driving down the M1 from Halifax down to London, and all of a sudden a light comes on the dashboard, the whole car swerves to the left, loses power. You're just like, this isn't happening to me. This just isn't right. Pulled over on the hard shoulder, called up the services, whilst on the phone waiting about 5 minutes on the phone. Hit the ignition again, it seemed to be okay. Limped it back down to London at 50 miles an hour. It was very scary, but I just had to get home. Just had to get home. That's all I wanted. I was upset at that point and just wanted to get home.
When he finally made it, Gary sought specialist help.
I booked it into my local garage that I've been using for years. Explained the problem. They then said, just drop it in, we'll take a look at it. I got a phone call a couple of hours later just saying this car needs a new engine. And at that point, I was absolutely devastated. And it was from then onwards that the nightmare really started. The garage came back to me with their quote for them to do it of £3,500. I shopped around on the internet and found a company that would do it for £2,500, which was a complete brand new engine in the car. I was just devastated. For buying a second-hand car, you don't expect that kind of expenditure in the first couple of weeks.
Understandably, Gary chased Kurt Klaus about the faulty car. He wanted a refund or to have the engine paid for, but the car dealer gave him the runaround.
I was ringing the garage at least 3 or 4 times a day asking for Kurt Klaus. I knew it was him that was picking up. He would then say, nope, sorry, he's not in. I'll go up. What do you want? I'll see if he's around. I'll get him to call you back. Never received a call back. Now I can laugh, but at the time I was so angry because you know who you're talking to and you know you're getting fobbed off.
Kurt Klaus never called back. But in time, Gary did get a phone call from Trading Standards. They told him that they had swooped on Kurt Klaus's empire and were seizing many of his vehicles. And now the crime-fighting couple started to dig into Klaus's finances. What they were about to find was criminal activity on a huge scale. And later, we'll see how the crime-fighting sleuths discovered the secrets of Kurt Klaus's ill-gotten gains. Every year, the police succeed in clawing back millions of pounds that crooks in their region have made illegally. And where does it go? Well, some ends up being given to schemes like this one. A few miles southeast of Manchester city centre lies Gorton, once a thriving industrial hub. When the factory doors shut in the 60s, it became plagued with crime. Nick Buckley grew up not far from the area and witnessed antisocial behaviour on a daily basis within his community.
Gorton's had its issues over the last couple of decades. Crime's been one of them. Gang activity was another. The police and the council have really got a grip to a lot of that now. What we're left with now in the area is low-level antisocial behaviour.
Nick spent nearly 10 years working for the council as a community safety officer before falling victim to government cuts.
The day of the riots in Manchester city centre, that was a day I realised that my job for the council was going due to the cuts and the austerity measures. And I'm looking out of the window at the riots, looking at young people making really poor decisions for the city, but also for their lives. And I thought to myself, we need to do a lot more with young people, a lot more prevention and early intervention work, rather than waiting until they've made big mistakes and locking them up and taking just enforcement action.
Undeterred, Nick took his redundancy payout and invested the money into setting up a charity to help steer these teenagers away from a life of crime.
So I decided to hand in my papers, take voluntary redundancy, and I used that money to set up a registered charity called Mancunian Way, and we're all about prevention and early intervention.
With a lack of funding from the council, the charity was just getting by, but Nick had bigger ambitions.
I've obviously never run a charity before, When I first started, I had no idea how to set charity up. And the first 6 months was really, really difficult. My redundancy was almost running out. We couldn't get any money in. So the work we were doing in Gorton at the beginning was all street-based, which means my staff would go out on a Friday, Saturday evening, engage young people on the streets, in the parks, have a chat with them, offer advice and guidance. And the common thing they kept telling us was, we need a youth club, we need somewhere to go. And that's when we saw the Police Authorities grant, which is all funded by the Proceeds of Crime Act.
Desperate to find a way to raise the cash to set up a youth club, Nick found what he was looking for in the unlikeliest of places, through cash seized from criminals.
We got £500, £600, £700, and we used that money to buy the initial equipment for the youth club. And it's over 2 years old now. It runs for 4 hours on a Friday evening, and a normal Friday it's attracting 60, 70 young people to the session. And I wouldn't have started without that little bit of money at the beginning to get things going.
The club became a real focal point for children, and engaging them in activities proved to be a big hit with parents as well.
We do all sorts at this youth club. Every week we're doing something different. So today we're going to do a cooking session, we've got some PlayStations going, we've got our local police officers down there going to be playing pool and table tennis, and in a bit we've got a sports coach who'll be doing some sports sessions. While they're here, that's when my staff are engaging with them and trying to educate them on social issues, seeing what issues they've got at home, seeing if they need advice on careers. So a little money can have a big impact if you spend it correctly.
We play football, we play volleyball, basketball, every game. It's a fun place in here, that's why I come here.
I've learned how to bake a cake very well now. It gives you aspiration about what you want to be in the future.
If they didn't have somewhere like this to go to, it would be, out on the streets. They're definitely out getting in trouble or being noisy or just not having anywhere to go. You walk through the neighborhood around here and it's kids kind of hanging out on the street.
Criminals destroy communities and destroy individual lives, and when we take their money back off them and I get to spend it to improve the lives of young people in those communities, it's the best money I ever spend.
Seizing criminals' assets is an important way of showing communities up and down the country that crime doesn't pay. But those involved in criminal activities will often try to hide their assets, and it's down to the financial investigators to uncover the money trail.
Earlier on, we saw financial investigators in Wales make an arrest of a man suspected of money laundering offences. They have frozen his bank accounts and searched his house for details of anything he has bought. And hidden away in his car, the investigators think this document is proof of how the money might be laundered.
Totally different address again then, always this case, supposedly living there.
Yeah.
What's the connection with that address?
What we've got here is a land registry charge notice. It's for a separate address within the area, yet it's actually addressed to the property that we're currently searching. One of the ways that money laundering works is through property, whereby they will buy various amounts of property.
The document shows a property has been bought, and officers suspect it was paid for by the drug dealer's money.
The property that was purchased is this property here, and the property was purchased for £90,000. There's going to be inquiries made by the investigation team in relation to that, but that's the centre of the inquiry, really.
This is important work that will need to be carried out by the financial investigators to work out where the money has gone. And whilst the first search was happening, more financial investigators have been going through a property down the road that is linked to their suspect. They too believe they've found evidence of someone making money illegally.
Basically, what we recovered from the premises at the moment, you just go through it.
Yeah, what we've got a quantity of cash that was found in brown envelopes in a safe upstairs, a Nike bag which we estimate has got about £2,000 in cash, and 2 bundles of cash with approximately £1,000 in each bag, which was also found in the in a hat box on the floor of the top room. So these will be seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act.
The search has turned up much evidence the police want to investigate further. Who knows what secrets will be uncovered from inside these bags?
Number of computers to be examined. There's approximately £5,000 in cash. number of diaries, phones and things, and financial documents for us to go through.
And after a busy morning, the Tarion team have 3 people in custody and a large amount of their suspect's financial history in the boot of their car. The task for the investigators now is simple. If the house was bought with criminal money, it will be seized and sold off. And if it's come from the proceeds of crime, the money will be put back into the public purse.
Earlier, we saw how Trading Standards sleuths Colin and Sue Rumford had been contacted by customers who had been duped by second-hand car dealer Kirk Klaus. So they decided to take a closer look at his finances and, as so often happens when financial investigators follow the money, they find a link to crime. It turns out Klaus wasn't paying a penny in tax, but where was he hiding his ill-gotten gains?
We applied for a warrant to visit the premises, basically seize business documentation and inspect what was on the premises to push the investigation forward.
Colin and Sue knew he must have had something hidden somewhere, so like a pair of bloodhounds, they investigated every property Klaus had links to and soon made a massive discovery. It was so remarkable they got their cameras out and filmed it.
There was a large barn and it was full of high-value vehicles, from Rolls-Royce to Bentleys, Dodge cars to American cars. Once we looked at them, we knew they were worth a lot of money.
Finding the cars proved that Kirk Klaus had major assets. And when he went to court over his dodgy business practices, he was charged with conspiring to defraud customers and money laundering offences and sentenced to 3 years in jail. During the trial, some of the victims were brave enough to come forward and testify against Klaus. One of these was Gary, who had paid £10,000 for a dodgy car that clapped out the day he bought it.
As soon as I heard he was in trouble and as soon as the Trading Standards called me up, I wanted to do whatever I could to help make this man face justice for what he'd done to me and to others. The courtroom was interesting because they were trialling, I believe, 8 people at one time, with Kirk being the ringleader and 7 of his accomplices, and they were still intimidated. They didn't look guilty for anything they'd done. They just stared coldly at you, and you're telling your story. And I don't know if they listened or not. I would like to think they listened, and I'd like to think they felt some sort of remorse, but I doubt it.
After the trial, the judge ordered Klaus to repay over £1 million he'd made illegally. He was stubbornly refusing to pay up. So Colin and Sue again went in search for any assets Klaus was hiding. Klaus had been renting a storage unit some miles away to hide his assets from the authorities, but there was no hiding from these officers. Like a dog with a bone, they weren't going to give up until they'd got their hands on all of his assets.
This is it in front of you.
We then went into the premises and it was just total shock. I just couldn't believe what we was looking at. There was drag cars, there was Rolls Royces, there was some absolutely amazing vehicles that were all parked. It was full. And for at least 20 minutes, we're just walking round viewing the vehicles in a little bit of a shock, really. They were transporting vehicles all night, right till 11 o'clock the following day, because there were so many. We actually stayed overnight. We took it in turns to get some shut-eye.
Klaus had made a blunder in trying to outsmart these 2 unassuming Trading Standards officers, and now he was paying the price by losing everything.
In terms of a seizure, this was a one-off for us. We've never before or since seized this sort of volume of cars. By the time we finished this investigation with the police and ourselves seizing various vehicles, we'd actually accumulated 115 vehicles, which was quite something, really, we think.
The 115 vehicles seized from Klaus went on to be sold at auction, raising just under £1 million, some of which went back to customers he'd ripped off.
Knowing now that he had a huge lockup of cars and motorbikes hidden away makes me feel sick, because he hasn't earned that money, he's stolen it off people, and he's lived a good life stealing it off people. It makes me sick. I think it's fantastic that the police have the power to take assets that these guys have not earned away from them and to sell them and to give it back to the people that they've hurt along their journeys.
Investigators from West Yorkshire Police analysed Klaus's activities. They calculated Klaus had made an astonishing £15 million over the years, and he still has £6.5 million somewhere. And the police won't stop looking for it.
Klaus seems to think that he can run away from this, but this is a debt for life. So once he's served his sentence, we'll be waiting for him and we won't take our eye off this.
Kurt Klaus has been given additional jail time because he still hasn't paid back the money. It just goes to show when it comes to proceeds of crime, he'll continue to be punished until the debt has been paid off.
Earlier on, we saw how the National Crime Agency put a gang of Kent criminals under 24-hour surveillance. Police watched the gang's every move as they searched for and then bought themselves this boat, the Albernina. The National Crime Agency officers sensed the gang were planning something major and put the Albernina boat under constant surveillance. The gang finally sailed away in their boat and made the trip to Europe. Officers realised what they were doing was buying guns, and once unloaded, those guns were to be sold on the streets of London. Armed police swooped on the gang members at the boat. But gang leader Harry Schilling had already left. He was arrested at a DIY superstore. And the final gang member was taken down in McDonald's. All that remains of the scam is the boat the gang used, and now that's due to be sold off here at the Proceeds of Crime auction. Auction manager Aidan Larkin is ready to get the sale underway.
So who'll kick things off for lot number 45, the Albernina. It's here to be sold with no reserve, 5,000 straight in. Bid it at £5,000 on the Albernina at £5,000. It's a steal at that at 5,000 and 6. Bid it at £6,000 at £9,000. It's with the online bidder at £9,000. Bid it at £10,000.
£10,000 is a good price for the boat, but Aidan thinks he can get more.
With the online bidder, is there any lip bids in the hall? 11. It's at £11,000. We've got 3 bidders from 2 different continents, I can see. £12,000 now. That's cheap at £12,000. These things are retail 30,000 at least. At £13,000.
The gun running past of this yacht doesn't seem to be slowing down the bids for Albernina.
13,500, thank you, at 13,500. At 13,500 once, 14,000. At 14,000, you're testing me at £14,000. 14,750. At 14,750. Bid it at 14,750 once, 14,750 twice, third and last. Sold online, well done, at £14,750 on the Albernina. Well, given the fact that this thing is over 35 years old and it's been rummaged and it's been taken through by the government agencies and searched thoroughly, the fact that it achieved, I think, possibly £14,000 at auction is a great price. We're very happy with that.
Even when criminals are behind bars, they're still paying off their debt to society.
And when they come out, if they haven't cleared that debt, the police will continue to hunt down their ill-gotten gains.
An old pub makes for a great bargain in Homes Under the Hammer next here on BBC One. Then at 11, a first-time mum at 49 is in labour in the secret life of the hospital bed. And at 11:45, how long can you keep food for before it goes off? Find out in Rip Off Britain Food.